I'm taking the time to explain this because, as I said, this ayah represents a summary of the entire Qur'an. What were they told to do except, and then Allah says, لِيَعْبُدُ اللَّهِ, so they may become ibad of Allah, so they may enter into slavery of Allah and worship. The first thing is slavery is different from worship because slavery has no time associated with it. Worship is at a certain time, at a certain place, a certain activity. But a slave, when is he a slave? When he's sleeping, he's a slave. When he's awake, he's a slave. When he's eating, when he's not eating, when he's changing his clothes, when he's working, when he's on vacation, he's always a slave. So slavery is a state of being, while worship is an act itself. You understand? Someone can be a worshipper at certain times, but they're not always a worshipper. But a slave is what? Always a slave. They're always a slave. That's one huge difference between the two. But in slavery, what are you asked to do? Everything that the master says. Everything that the master says you have to do. Right? So it's totally different from the idea of service, and significantly different also from the idea of worship. Both of those things are separate. That's the first issue with slavery. What were those 5 conditions that I was referring to before? The first of them is actually love. That to be a slave of Allah, you have to love Allah. You can't be considered His slave until you love Him. And what that love means is everything else you love must be less than the love you have for Allah. And every other thing you love must be dictated by the love you have for Allah. So you cannot love your wife or your children or your family or your whatever unless that love is taba'an. It's underneath, it's in submission to the love you have for Allah. That's the first condition of slavery. The second is obedience. لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق, like the Messenger says, there's no obedience to the creation while disobeying the Creator, basically. Okay? In other words, we can obey, you have to obey your boss, you have to obey traffic laws, yes, you have to obey other things, but none of those obediences can exist while you are in disobedience to Allah. That obedience comes first. So the first one was love, and the second one is obedience. The third one is sincerity. And what that means is everything you do it as a slave now. It's not some things you do as a slave. If you're a worshipper, only salah is for Allah, everything else is for you. Right? But if you're a slave, what is everything for? Or who is everything? Everything's for Allah. Everything. Your job is for the sake of Allah. Your family is for the sake of Allah. Your worship is for the sake of Allah. Everything's for the sake of Allah. But when you just think of yourself as a worshipper, you only give one part of your life to Allah. You don't give the whole thing to Allah. So Allah teaches us in the Qur'an, Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. There's the Rabb again. My prayer belongs to Allah. It's for His sake. My sacrifice is for His sake. My life and my death are also for His sake. You know what that means practically? It practically means that when I make career goals, when I make family goals, when I make business goals, what is my ultimate agenda? What are these things for? They are for the service of my Master. It's a change of attitude.